Senator Murango.
Asante sana Mstahiki Spika kwa kunipa hii nafasi. Kwanza naunga mkono huu mswada na ningetaka kuchangia kwa njia ifuatayo kwamba kwa muda mrefu sasa wakazi na wazawa wengi ambao wanaishi katika karibu na misitu hawaja kuwa kifaidika na hizo carbon credits kwa sababu kuna wale ambao wanachukulia kama hao ndo wanafaa, na zile jamii hata kama jamii nyingi zimekuwa zikiwa na adhari, zikipatwa na adhari tofauti kutoka na wanyamapori na mambo kama hayo, kwa muda mrefu hawanja faidika na misitu. Kwa hivyo huu mswada utaleta natija katika wakazi na wazao ambao wanakaa karibu na misitu. Lakini ningetaka pia kuongezea kwamba pia wakati miti inaorodheshwa katika hii mambo ya carbon credit, mimea pia ambayo inalimwa na wakulima kama vile kahawa, minazi, miparachichi inafaa pia iwekwe katika kiwango cha kwamba pia wao wanapewa carbon credit, kwa sababu ikifanywa hivyo itakuwa pia wakulima wanafaidika kwa njia tofauti, hata kama mazao haitakuwa na pesa nyingi sana. Pia Mstahiki Spika, hata kama tunaangalia mambo ya miti, kuna miti, baadhi ya miti ambao tunafaa tuiorodheshe kwamba itolewe pia katika kupandwa, kwa sababu ina athari kubwa. Kwanza inafanya pia hata inaleta madhara makubwa kuliko miti mingine, kama miti ile inaitwa mikaratusi, eucalyptus. Eucalyptus ama mikaratusi ni miti ambayo inafaa kuondolewa kwa sababu ililetwa pia na wazungu kupandwa katika vinamasi, swamps, kuondoa yale maji yalikuwa mengi ili mzungu aweze kupata nafasi ya kulima. Kwa hivyo tunafaa tuweke taratibu fulani ya kuondoa kwa miti kama mikaratusi ambayo haifai katika kupandwa na kulima, kama tutaangalia kubadilika kwa hali ya hewa. Pia katika hii misitu mahali tunapanda miti, hifadhi na misitu, pia wakulima na Kenya wapewe nafasi kufanya ufugaji kama ufugaji wa nyuki, kwa sababu nyuki ni mzuri sana katika usalama, kuangalia usalama wa chakula, kwa sababu wanahusika na pollination. Na kwa hivyo ni vizuri pia wakati ile misitu wale wanakaa karibu na misitu pia waweze, wakati regulations zinafanywa, waweze kupewa nafasi ya kufaidika na ufugaji wa nyuki katika ile misitu. Na nikimalizia ni kwamba ninafurahia kuona pia vijana wakihusishwa katika mambo ya climate change, kwa sababu ukienda kama kwetu vijana wengi sana wamepotea kwa sababu wanasema wafaidiki na sana kwa upanzi wa miti. Hata kama wamepewa nafasi katika kupanzi wa miti, pia katika faida, hata kama ni hifadhi zile zinaitwa conservancy, pia wao wanahusishwa na pia kupata haki yao wakati mgao wa carbon credit unakuja katika nchi hii. Asante sana Mstahiki Spika.
Senator Muma.
Thank you very much, your Right Honorable Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute to this debate. Mr. Speaker, it is all agreed, we all agree that this country needs a policy and regulations to assist in governing issues relating to carbon credits. Mr. Speaker, therefore, laws to deal with this issue are welcome. Mr. Speaker, but you must allow me to actually point out the anomalies that we have had. Mr. Speaker, beginning with the procedure, that one day public participation cannot be adequate, cannot be meaningful to something that is as important as this. I know we are trying to ensure that we look good to the international community next week, and it is good for us to look good, but Mr. Speaker, we have actually flouted the rule when it comes to meaningful public participation. Mr. Speaker, we have also flouted the common rule that policy proceeds or precedes legislation. We do not have any policy, and I think Honorable Chute has raised this in this House before. We don't have a policy, a national policy guiding matters relating to carbon credits. And in fact, we have foreign companies and some locals who are benefiting seriously over our national resources, our natural resources on matters carbon credit. So we needed that national policy, and usually you begin with policy and then you bring in the law and regulations. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I hope that even if this law is passed, that we will agree on the need to come back and regularize some of the issues. And because I have very few minutes, I would want to suggest that we actually relook at some of the things. Mr. Speaker, this law has largely focused on carbon credits and is benefiting mainly, has provided a lot more that will benefit the international community than the communities, the local communities. Mr. Speaker, this law has limited the role of county governments and communities. Even though it makes reference to communities, it is a vague reference to communities. Any community member reading this law will not be clear what this means for them as a community. So I think we will need to revisit this in order for us to do justice, particularly for our communities. Mr. Speaker, we need the people of Kakamega to know whether we have people earning over Kakamega Forest, which they are working day and night to conserve, but somebody from somewhere will all of a sudden take chunks of it and start earning. That is the new style land grabbing, Mr. Speaker, and we need to protect our communities from these issues. Mr. Speaker, clause 23A makes reference to section 6FA that does not exist in this bill. So I do not know what that is. The technical people need to look at it and see how to address that issue.
Senator Oroba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remind the House that in 1989, Mr. Speaker, and I was just 3 years old then, in 1989, a lady called Wangari Maathai actually stood up and fought. Many men, many honorable men, MPs, including His Excellency, our former President Moi, because she found out about a 62-story building that was going to be put up, a skyscraper in Uhuru Park, and she wanted to conserve the environment. She stood up, she fought these men. They called her crazy. They called her mad. They called her an African, Mr. Speaker, because she was opposing men. But she knew something. She was fighting for the conservation of trees and our environment. Mr. Speaker, in 2023, today I'm 37 years old, and I have the opportunity to stand in Senate and actually listen to probably descendants of the same men who are now supporting that we actually need to do something about climate change and we need to legislate. Mr. Speaker, I want to say, let this be a lesson to the men and the women who are in this house, to our leaders, that sometimes women who stand up in different places, leaders, fighting for a cause, might actually be onto something, Mr. Speaker. They might be onto something that will lead to climate change, to a bill, to an amended bill, so many years down the lane. So, Mr. Speaker, I stand to support this amendment bill, and I want to urge our leaders in this house that they must emulate Wangari Maathai. They must stand up and we don't need to legislate good behavior. They must stand up, sensitize their communities on what carbon credits means, sensitize their communities on what it means to actually benefit in this amended bill. You don't need to legislate good behavior, Mr. Speaker. We just need to inculcate the culture of understanding that even the women in leadership might be onto something. Just like Wangari Maathai was called crazy and mad, and today we are in this house legislating on the roots of the seed that she planted, Mr. Speaker. So I stand to support this bill, and I want to say that as we are legislating whatever, let us not forget that it is that crazy, mad woman called Wangari Maathai who got us to where we are today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Eddy. Senator Sifuna, what is your point of clarification? And where does it fall in our standing order?
Mr. Speaker, I had requested a point of clarification under Standing Order 126. Mr. Speaker, in the last proceedings I was following, my colleague Senator Cherargei was actually removed from this House under Standing Order 126. And in my reading of that Standing Order 126, it says that a senator removed under that order shall thereupon, without question being put, be suspended from the service of the Senate for a minimum of 91 calendar days and a maximum of 180 calendar days, including the day of the suspension, and shall, during such suspension, forfeit the right of access to the precincts of Parliament, and the Sergeant at Arms shall take necessary action to enforce the order. So the clarification I'm seeking from the chair is whether Senator Cherargei is rightly in the precincts of Parliament, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Cherargei did appeal, and he gave valid reasons, and suspended. He's staying away for all that period. So he's rightfully in the House. Yeah. And on the same breath, maybe I was to deliver a ruling on your matter too. And maybe I may proceed to deliver that ruling. You did appeal. I looked at the appeal. It's merited, and therefore, having served 1 day out of the 3 days, you can proceed to continue attending the sessions of this House. Proceed, Senator Eddy.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I just want to be sure that I'm timing myself here, because it's a very important matter. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to matters of climate change, where we find ourselves today as a country, we definitely need to be more scientific, and definitely we need to also rely on data. Because when we review this particular bill, we must be able to look at the journey that we have traveled as a country to be part of this particular bill. And Mr. Speaker, I wanted to comment very fast that the essence of climate change and control of climate issues in our country cannot be without recognizing the fact that fossil fuels has been at the edge of why global warming issues have been a problem. In 1896, Mr. Speaker, a scientist called Svante put a very compelling argument that burning fossil fuels was the major cause of climate change in global south and global north, Mr. Speaker. Nobody paid attention to him until in the 1930s, when other scientists joined this particular scientist, Mr. Speaker, to argue the case for northern US as well as the northern Pacific for what was becoming a major problem. And Mr. Speaker, at that time there was another scientist a British scientist in Europe called Guy Stewart Callender, who was for the first time the first scientist to actually use data and science and mathematical models to argue the case for climate crisis, Mr. Speaker. But even then, he wasn't taken seriously, Mr. Speaker. It was up until 1988, Mr. Speaker, when a scientist called James Hansen, who was a NASA scientist, brought this issue to the UN that actually global warming due to fossil fuels was a major issue, that then the UN responded by forming the first inter-panel on climate change in the 1988, Mr. Speaker. Why am I giving this backdrop, Mr. Speaker? Because the Paris Agreement comes on that backdrop. In 1992, Mr. Speaker, we had the Rio Conference. And in that Rio Conference, Mr. Speaker, many countries that were developed that were causing serious climate problems, including the US at that time, did not participate in making sure that our countries could be compensated, Mr. Speaker. And the Paris Agreement, for which this particular bill comes, Mr. Speaker, that proposes a market mechanism, Mr. Speaker, is an agreement that seeks to enable us as countries to develop our own mechanisms internally, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, while I do support this particular bill, Mr. Speaker, I want to encourage the drafters of this bill to actually be able to think critically about the carbon market, Mr. Speaker, to the extent that we can actually make it more practical to local communities. For instance, Mr. Speaker, if you look at section 23C, we are giving the Cabinet Secretary a full control of a carbon market which does not allow even the Cabinet Secretary to interact with Parliament to be able to ensure that we can be able to have reporting mechanisms to Parliament in accordance to Article 94, Mr. Speaker. So I rise to support, but I would wish to urge us that as a nation, we must think about more practical mitigation, adaptation, and resilience mechanisms that work for us in the context of ensuring that if we don't have legally binding elements by the Western nations to be able to compensate or even to participate in this market, Mr. Speaker, we have our own ways of dealing with climate change. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Kinyua.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii kuunga mkono mswada huu wa mabadiliko wa tabia nchi ama hali ya hewa. Bwana Spika, ni vizuri sana kulinda mazingira Bwana Spika. Na upanzi wa miti ni wa busara sana katika nchi. Lakini Bwana Spika, kile ambacho kimekuwa kinavunja moyo ni kwa sababu katika mtaala wetu wa masomo hawajazingatia zaidi mambo ya mazingira na ukulima Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, nakumbuka wakati tukiwa wanafunzi tulikuwa tukienda tunazuia mmonyoko wa udongo Bwana Spika, lakini kila wakati tukipewa motisha tuliambiwa tusome, tuwe madaktari Bwana Spika, tuwe wahandisi Bwana Spika, na tuwe marubani. Bwana Spika, mkulima na watu ambao wanajihusisha na mambo ya upanzi wa miti na utunzaji wa mazingira haikuchukuliwa kwa muhimu Bwana Spika. Na ndiposa Bwana Spika, wakati huu nchi ambazo kwa kaboni Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo hata sisi hii sheria ambazo tunapitisha Bwana Spika itasaidia sana, kwa sababu ukitembea kama Laikipia, misitu iliyo Laikipia Bwana Spika, mfano kuna msitu wa Rumuruti, kuna msitu wa mahali kunaitwa Rariak, kuna Mogogodo Bwana Spika. Watu wale wako huko hawafaidiki Bwana Spika na hii miti ama huu misitu ambayo wako nayo Bwana Spika. Ukitembea mahali kaunti ya Kilifi, mahali kiongozi wa wachache ametoka, Stewart Mazao Bwana Spika, tuliwaona wananchi wa zile sehemu Bwana Spika wakisema hawaoni faida yoyote ya ile miti, ile mimbuyu, tayari wanaingoa Bwana Spika na wanaiuza katika nchi za uraibuni Bwana Spika, kwa sababu hawaoni faida yoyote Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo sasa Bwana Spika, sasa sisi vile ambavyo tuna mswada huu ukipita, tungelitaka Bwana Spika wale ambao wanakuja kutupatia ridhaa ama fidia misitu yetu tujue ni akina nani Bwana Spika, tusije tukapata nao watapeli wengine Bwana Spika ambao watakuwa hapa wakija hatujui ni pesa ngapi ambazo zimelipwa, tayari hao wameharibu mazingira yao Bwana Spika. Alafu wakija hapa wao ndio watatuambia watanunua hii kaboni kwa pesa ngapi Bwana Spika. Tunaishi katika hali ya uchochole Bwana Spika, ilhali miti ni yetu, wao wameharibu mazingira yao Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo Bwana Spika, hata ijapokuwa najua tutakuwa na hiki kongamano kubwa hapa wiki ijayo Bwana Spika, hayo mambo tuyaongee kiwaziwazi. Namshukuru Rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya Mheshimiwa William Ruto ameongea kinaga ubaga, ameyasema peupe kimasomaso, na mimi namunga mkono, na mimi na imani ya kwamba haya mambo tukiyafuatilia na tukipitisha huu mswada, watu wetu ambao wana misitu na shule zetu, vijana wametajwa, lakini Bwana Spika, gatuzi zetu zinatajwa katika mswada huu kwa kupitia tu, hakuna jambo ambalo linasemwa kwa kindani Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo nashukuru, naunga mkono Bwana Spika, lakini Bwana Spika, ni vizuri sisi tufuatilie mambo ya fidia kwa kindani, sio tu kwa makaratasi, lakini kusema na kutenda. Nashukuru Bwana Spika.
Senator Mwaruma.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa hii fursa umenipa ili kuunga mkono huu mswada ambao unapelekea kubadilisha sheria ya mabadiliko ya tabia nchi wa mwaka 2016 ama Climate Change Act ya 2016. Nashukuru waziri Senator Soipan Tuya kwa sababu tulipokuwa na yeye mkutano Naivasha wa kamati ya mazingira aliahidi kuweka sera na sheria za kudhibiti uuzaji wa mkopo wa kaboni ama carbon credits. Nilifikiri kwamba ataleta sheria mpya kabisa, lakini katika hekima yake aliamua kubadilisha ule mswada wa tabia nchi wa 2016 kipengee cha 23 ili kuweka udhibiti wa mabadiliko ya tabia nchi kwa ile sheria. Hakuna mtu, Mheshimiwa Spika, hajaona madhara ya kuharibu mazingira ama madhara ya mabadiliko ya tabia nchi. Pale ninatoka mahali kunaitwa Undani, kuna mahali kulikuwa na mito na mito imekauka. Kuna mahali watu walikuwa wanachota maji kwa mfereji, lakini kwa sababu vyanzo vya maji vimekauka, sasa hizo wanatumia magari ama otabuza. Kwa hivyo nashukuru sana, na katika huu mswada ningependa kuangalia kipengee cha 12 ambacho kinapelekea kuweka sera na sheria mufti za kuangalia mkopo wa kaboni ama carbon credits. Kule kwetu Taita Taveta, na nafikiri kiongozi wa walio wengi Mheshimiwa Cheriot alitangaza akasema kwamba mkopo wa kaboni mwingi unatoka kule maeneo ya Kasigau, Taita Taveta, lakini wale wananchi hawapati faida yoyote. Na nikiangalia takwimu, Mheshimiwa Spika, Savo East na Savo West, ile shamba ni ekari 2,700,000 lililo chini ya Savo. Katika ranches ni 1,200,000 ambayo iko chini ya Savo ranches. Na mkopo wa kaboni unalipiwa, lakini hatuelewi kama wananchi ama kaunti tunafaidi namna gani. Huu mswada naunga mkono kwa sababu unapelekea kuweka peupe bayana kama tukilinda haya mazingira, na nafikiri kuna wengine wanayaita mazingara. Mazingara si environment, mazingara ni mbinu za uchawi yanaitwa mazingira. Kwa hivyo saizi kuna umuhimu zaidi kuliko mbeleni kudhibiti mazingira, kwa sababu kuna kazawadi, there's an incentive. Na tukiangalia, Mheshimiwa Spika, hizi ekari 4,000 kando na kuwa tunafaidi kiutalii, pia kuanzia sasa tukipitisha huu mswada leo, basi tutapata faida kupitia kwa mkopo wa kaboni, Mheshimiwa Spika. Na la mwisho kabisa, serikali za kaunti zimepatiwa kazi katika kutengeneza mipango yake ya miaka 5 ama CIDP. Waweke pia mambo ya kudhibiti mabadiliko ya tabia nchi ama climate change action, ya kwamba tutapanda miti mingapi kama miradi ya miaka 5, na katika bajeti zao waweke mambo ya kudhibiti uharibifu wa mazingira ambao unapelekea mabadiliko.
Senator Tabitha Mutenda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity, and I do rise to support this particular bill. Matters climate are matters that are very passionate to me because I'm one of the advocates, and as a business person, I do produce biodegradable bags in this country, and I really pride in the discussion of climate change, because this is the way to go, not only for us, but for the generations and the generations that will come after us. I want to start by really appreciating none other than Honorable Wangari Maathai for implementation of the Green Belt movement in regards to the advocate of planting trees. His Excellency, the President, as we speak, is also a champion on climate matters, and he has also advocated for tree planting in these countries through our schools. And I would urge in this discussion of climate change, the schools that are visiting Parliament today, we urge them as they go back to be able to continue and practicing tree planting in their schools and also in their homes, Mr. Speaker. I note that as a country, as a capital city, and also as a Nairobi delegation, Mr. Speaker, that UNEP is situated in this beautiful city of ours. And it is a very positive pride that we are hosting this climate summit at this particular time. It's a great honor. As I also have my bill on agriculture in regards to extension officers, it comes at a very good time that I look forward that when this bill will pass, it's going to be very impactful on matters environment, on matters climate, Mr. Speaker. This is because the officers, the extension officers will be focusing on ensuring that good agricultural practices are put in place, both from a digital place, the technology that is in place, to ensuring that we maximally achieve good practices of agriculture. I've had colleagues mention that it is one thing to plant trees. It's another to maintain that tree to its maturity. And I believe through the bill of on extension officers, then we are going to achieve broadly, Mr. Speaker. Discussion on the revenues on credit carbon have been mentioned by colleagues, and yes, I want to support and agree that it is very important that the discussion of revenues is open. Who are the beneficiaries? How much is the level of the sum of beneficiary to our country? The CSR activities in terms of the people living in those particular regions, what is their benefit and how they are benefiting? This discussion should be open, this discussion should be brought to light so that there is maximum benefit. I'm happy that the CBC education is also guiding our young generation in terms of how to do the agriculture, and this extends, Mr. Speaker, not only to this from the school level, but also back to our homes, our regions. And with these good practices put in place, Mr. Speaker, it's going to be very highly impactful. I want members also to have some time, Google me, and you'll find that I have a very unique product that concerns the environment as far as biodegradability of our products is concerned. I do pride in the product that I put in the market in this country. It's one of the products that is changing lives, and I'm happy to be in this particular discussion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Beatrice.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, as a champion of the SDG in the House, I rise to support the Climate Change Amendment Bill, number 42 of 2023. And Honorable Speaker, the SDG 13 is about climate action. Honorable Speaker, this SDG particularly calls for urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. And some of the impacts of climate change, Honorable Speaker, is about floods and drought, which are very common catastrophes that face us in this country, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, with floods and drought, we generally end up with poverty and hunger within our country, and of course, conflicts that we generally always deal with in the House, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, urgent action on climate change is about saving lives and saving livelihoods, and generally about reducing inequalities in the community. Honorable Speaker, I support this bill as it spells out clear benefits that will be accrued by our communities. It spells out in the amendment about the consultations that will be there with our respective counties. And Honorable Speaker, it also spells out an aspect of good governance because we see that there's enhanced work of the climate change directorate that will be operationalized by the amendments that have been brought forward. And Honorable Speaker, as I support this amendment, I also call out on the ministry and the government at large that as the world moves to COP28, that is the Convention on Climate Change, at the end of this year, our country should be well prepared, the council should be well prepared so that we are able to negotiate more for more benefits to this country. And Honorable Speaker, climate change concerns all of us. I also want to allay fears to some members that have contributed here that the amendment bill also spells out a way in which the Cabinet Secretary will be giving a report to Parliament. And of course, it has only been changed from biannually to annually. So there will be a reporting mechanism that the Cabinet Secretary has to Parliament about issues of climate change. Honorable Speaker, I support this amendment.
Senator Kathure.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity also to give my remarks on this important bill. And on the onset, Honorable Speaker, I want to support this bill, which is very critical. And Mr. Speaker, actually, what the government is doing is in line with the obligations that is in the Constitution of Kenya, Article 69, 69(1)(a), which actually has given the state that it shall ensure sustainable exploitation, utilization, management, and conservation of the environment and the natural resources, and ensure the equitable sharing of the accruing benefits. Mr. Speaker, carbon credit is a huge business. And actually, Kenyans should now know that growing trees and not planting trees, growing trees should be an enterprise because a lot of benefits are in this business, Mr. Speaker. The outside world there, the Western world has really benefited from this. And unfortunately, Kenya, some communities or some lands, some people have been given some money and there, but the amount of money that they have been given is not commensurate to what they are supposed to be getting. So, Mr. Speaker, these regulations, once enacted, will be able to help Kenyans, those who are in the business of growing trees, to benefit substantially. Because there's a bill on Speaker 6 provide for regulations on carbon markets. If we get this legal framework, definitely the communities will benefit socially, economically, and also environmental benefits. Mr. Speaker, you know the counties have huge tracts of land. And if the counties can be encouraged really to utilize those bare lands, especially where I come from in Meru County, we have so many hills. If you go to Japan, Honorable Speaker, all the hills in Japan have been rehabilitated and trees are growing there like nobody's business. So in our counties, actually Nairobi is not benefiting from this because the whole of Nairobi is houses. Honorable Speaker, my colleague here, Senator Sifuna, your people cannot benefit from this business. But if you talk to us who have a lot of land, and we get good governors who can be able to communicate and to work with other people, I can be able to assist Senator Sifuna in Meru because we have a lot of hills there which are bare and which need a lot of trees. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with all those who have spoken here. And I want to thank His Excellency the President for taking the lead, especially on environmental matters. In the year 2016, I participated in the enactment of the Climate Change Act, which was Honorable Otichiro's bill, who is currently the governor of Vihiga County. Mr. Speaker, we did a lot to enact that bill. We really went to the depth of that legislation. And Kenya was actually one of the first countries in Africa and almost the 10th in the world to enact the Climate Change Act. And now that we are amending this act, and the president is actually the chairman of the National Climate Change Council. And now also, he is actually the guy who is spearheading the environmental matters. I also take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to welcome the delegates who will be coming to Kenya next week. Kenya is very hospitable. They come for the conference. And as much as possible, also they should go to our national parks, Nairobi National Park, Masai Mara, to the coast, so that they can see the diversity, including the Meru National Park, which is one of the ecosystems.
Senator Osotsi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to also weigh in on this very important bill. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, I want to say that I support this bill because this bill is long overdue. Mr. Speaker, matters of carbon trading, they are matters which are very weighty, and Africa and Kenya has not been in a better position to take advantage of carbon trading because of lack of appropriate policy and legal framework. So these amendments proposed in this bill, Mr. Speaker, will actually open the channel for Kenya to maximize on its carbon credit potential by ensuring, Mr. Speaker, that we create the appropriate path for carbon trading. We have the appropriate mechanism for regulation of carbon markets. Mr. Speaker, it will also provide an opportunity to have the National Climate Change Action Plan, and also, most importantly, Mr. Speaker, how do people or communities participate in carbon markets? Carbon credit trading, Mr. Speaker, is very, very, very crucial, especially in our counties. And I want to echo the sentiments by Senator Muma that this bill talks very little about how counties can be involved in this process. We do not want counties just to be lumped together with the community initiatives. As a Senate, I think every bill that is presented to us, we must look at it and see what are the interests of the counties in that bill. That's very important. Mr. Speaker, I represent a county that is one of the top 5 counties in forest cover. And if you look at the top 10 counties with the forest covers, they have one significant characteristic. They are all counties which get the lowest shareable revenue. Mr. Speaker, we have counties like Lamu, which are 44% forest cover, Vihiga 36%, Kirinyaga 30%, Elgeyo Marakwet 30%, Bomet 24%. They have a similar characteristics. And therefore, this bill should provide mechanism for counties to benefit through ONSO's revenue from carbon trading. So I look forward for amendments so that we need to ensure that our counties benefit from these carbon markets and carbon trading. Mr. Speaker, this bill also talks about establishment of the National Carbon Registry, where all data, all documents in relation to carbon trading will be stored. I think this is very critical because one of the things that has been lacking is, Mr. Speaker, the issue of awareness, the issue of information dissemination on how carbon trading is going to be done in this country. Mr. Speaker, even as we talk about carbon trading, let us also talk about our policies that promote climate change. Mr. Speaker, I was impressed when the national government announced that they were going to plant, I don't know how many billions of trees. Mr. Speaker, that was progressive. But again, Mr. Speaker, that policy was the
Senator Boni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I missed the House. I was away for 1 week when the President was visiting my county, and I followed you online. I want to congratulate you for the good work. Mr. Speaker, I want to extend my congratulations to the Governor of Vihiga, His Excellency Otichilo, for his forwardness in legislation when he came up with this bill, and we joined the National Assembly as the Senate and agreed with them. The amendments that have been proposed are, as Senator Mutua said, long overdue. My take is as follows, Mr. Speaker. That I remember many, many years ago, when I was at Malinya Primary School, we were taught basic science. We were told human beings breathe out carbon dioxide and the trees breathe out oxygen. Then the human beings take in the oxygen from the trees, and the trees take in the carbon dioxide from human beings. At that time, we used to play around with it. But Mr. Muliolo, the then headmaster in Marinya Primary School, would then go further and say, therefore, let nobody play around with Kakamega Forest. Those are many years ago. Today it has become evident that the world is a global biodigester. If we don't fix that biodigester, it will mean we shall live in shit, we shall breathe shit, and we shall eat shit. Mr. Speaker, which is exactly what this bill is proposing. Because of the shortage of time, I would just like to appeal in support of this bill to African countries that now communities that have taken up the lead in this matter should enjoy the carbon credit. Mr. Speaker, if you move from Kakamega County, you go to Nandi County, Vihiga County, and Kericho County, the amount of good that these people have done this republic by protecting forests should be a record in history. Mr. Speaker, because time is coming, let me just do a small rebuttal. There was an unfortunate contribution from a distinguished senator a few minutes ago. I didn't want to waste time, points of order. I want to register a strong rebuttal that Professor Wangari Muta, or rather Professor Madai, was not mad. Professor was the chairman of the Department of Human Anatomy at the University of Nairobi. Some of the people who are making this contribution, we don't even know whether they went to University of Jepkupe. Mr. Speaker,
Senator Mboni, because I was around, what the Honorable Senator said is that many people confused Professor Wangari Maathai as a man-woman. Confused. Now, because the member is not here, I request that maybe we will check on the answer. Yes. Because the presenting officer is also not agreeing with you.
I have no problem.
So I request we check on the answer whether that is what she said. Unless if she's here to also maybe give the clarification. That a second.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. African heads of state will come to this country to seek common rules to tap into the carbon market. And the reason why this is taking place, we want to develop, Mr. Speaker, a common set of rules to govern the benefit that African people will get from the international fast-growing carbon market. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is very refreshing to know that there is such a human traffic coming into this country, and it is the trend everywhere. I was in Mombasa 5 days ago, Mr. Speaker, and I was amazed. All the hotels, right from White Sands, have been pre-booked up to February. Our economy is on the rebound. When I arrived at the airport, Mr. Speaker, there were 2 Airbuses, Lufthansa and Ethiopian Airlines. There were 4 Boeing 777 that were on the ground at Mombasa International Airport. Our country is on the rebound. Members of this Senate, we should be on the front in advocating positive change to the image of the conglomerate called the Republic of Kenya. I support.
Thank you, Dr. Boni. Senator Siengo Karunda Beth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I stand to support this climate change amendment bill. Mr. Speaker, this bill is giving us a chance to combat desertification. It is giving us a chance to tackle land degradation. We know the effects of climate change as extreme droughts, and we know as Africa and Kenyans, we are recipients of what started happening elsewhere. And for this reason, that's why carbon credit has not been of benefit or much benefit to Africans and specifically to Kenyans. We know that carbon credit and carbon market that benefits others who are still the cause of the problem. And Kenyans have not been benefiting because carbon credit became, those who are fighting climate change became a $1 billion industry because of what is happening in the carbon market. Yet, our people are not benefiting. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would say this bill is giving us a chance also to advocate for use of green energy, which becomes a solution to some of the problems created by climate change. I would say, Mr. Speaker, involvement of youth, which is mentioned and also included in this bill, gives us a hope that our youth will be responsible in handling and taking care of our environment. Mr. Speaker, sir, at this point, for the first time, and maybe the only time, let me take this opportunity to thank the President of the Republic of Kenya for leading from the front in the matters of climate change. This is encouraging. I hope all of us will follow suit and ensure that we mitigate on climate change, on the effects of climate change, participating in using green energy, participating in planting trees, participating in really tackling effects of climate change. I support this bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I want to urge my colleagues here that when it is matters concerning this nation, we speak in one voice and move forward together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I support.
Actually, if Senator Beth and requested for more time, I could have ended 1 minute. But now that you have no interest, let us now hear from Senator Sigai Wakiri.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I also rise to support the amendment to the Climate Change Amendment Bill 2023, And it is timely, Mr. Speaker. We have had this conversation for a while now, and when we are asked to deal with matters which are of national importance, like what we are being asked to do now, it is important to speak in one voice, as the Honorable Senator Beth has said. Mr. Speaker, sir, in terms of the provisions of this particular bill, I dare say that the devil is in the details. There is so much that we ought to deal with and discuss in this particular amendment bill, but because of time, I know we will be very limited, and we will be brushing through a number of those provisions, which in terms of the finesse in details and also the provision, it would have been very important that we deal with it. Mr. Speaker, 5 minutes is not sufficient enough to deal with this. I am aware I'm losing much of my time in this case. Let me go straight to the proposals which I think are very key and important, which I also must support in terms of the provisions of Clause 4. That is seeking to amend Section 6 of the Principal Act, Mr. Speaker, the introduction of the county governments, the national, and also the public and relevant stakeholders in terms of policy making and involvement is very, very key. This provision is forward-looking because when you look at the previous provision, that was missing, and this is an improvement in the provisions of the law. Mr. Speaker, the provision of Section 7, which is being amended by Clause 5, and more importantly, in inclusion of the youth, is a vote of confidence in the role that the young generation plays. Statistics, Mr. Speaker, provides that 75% of the population of this country comprise people under the age of 35. And this is a confirmation that the President and his team applauds the role that the youth plays. And in this case, Mr. Speaker, it is important that when we are told to grow trees, a large percentage of the people who are involved in that assignment are the generation that is below the age bracket. And their inclusion in this particular amendment is long overdue, is very key, and I support to that particular extent. Mr. Speaker, the introduction of the requirement to have the Cabinet Secretary report to Parliament biannually, that's by the provision of Clause 6, seeking to amend Section 8, in this case, is the only amendment that I would have had and wished that we retain the previous provision that required the Cabinet Secretary to report twice a year to Parliament in terms of the policy, in terms of the status of implementation of such proposals made, in terms of additional responses that might be required of a country to deal with in matters climate change, and also in terms of progress of implementation of both national and international mandates the government is giving. This amendment is reducing that reporting mechanism to once per year instead of twice per year. I believe, Mr. Speaker, there must have been a reason behind it, which reason I would say, if opportunity would be availed, we would rather retain the provision of the Act, as it were, for purposes of achieving the mandate that we expect.
Senator Modama Agnes Kavidu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to support this amendment of this bill of climate change. Mr. Speaker, this is a very, very timely bill because many of our farmers and many of our people in our counties have. Mr. Speaker, can I be heard in silence, please? Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that side, a lot of noise is coming. can I be heard?
Honorable Senators.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It's not to noise, Senator Kavindu. They are consulting, but they should consult in a low tone.
Thank you.
Honorable
Thank you,
Senators,
Mr. Speaker.
Don't make noise.
Thank you. I'm saying this is a very timely bill, amendment. for climate change, because where we are heading as a global world is not a very good place. And so, Mr. Speaker, as I raise to support it, I want to raise some issues in my county, which we have a lot of farmers who have planted a lot of coffee and oranges and mangoes. And Mr. Speaker, I believe that these trees also produce a lot of carbon, and that is why we should fully involve the counties, so that the counties will also supervise what their farmers are doing in their farms and make sure that they benefit from the carbon credit. Because as they benefit from harvesting the coffee and mangoes and oranges, they should also benefit from carbon credit. Mr. Speaker, many organizations are benefiting from carbon credit marketing in Kenya, while Kenyans are not. And this is a very timely bill, because it will put up the structures for these people to trade officially and for our locals to benefit. Mr. Speaker, climate change should be included as one of the key variables in computing the shareable revenue for counties, to encourage counties to participate effectively in climate change. And I would also request, like the rest of us, that youth will be fully involved in planting of the trees. And also the forests that are in the counties must benefit in this carbon credit marketing, so that we can have on-source revenues from the counties to support our people. Mr. Speaker, I support and I thank you.
Senator Kisang William.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, as we welcome the rest of Africa and the world next week to Nairobi, Honorable Speaker, it would have been sad to welcome them to Nairobi and we will not have passed this particular law, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, you remember 2016 is when Honorable Chile came up with the law. We debated, it came to Senate, and it was passed. And you know, just like technology, Honorable Speaker, climate is dynamic like technology. So we should be amending the law every year, or even every 6 months. I know some of my colleagues have said the time was very short, there was no public participation, and we have not considered well how the counties are going to benefit. I want to report to honorable members that the law is very clear. Within 6 months, we can come back to the House, bring the same law, do amendments, and we ensure that our counties benefit adequately from this particular law, especially on the carbon credit issues, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, Elgeyo Marakwet County, as Honorable Sotsa has said, Elgeyo Marakwet, like the small counties, we have actually conserved the forest. All of them are above 30%. And we need to find a way where these particular counties will benefit more to increase their own source revenue, including actually, Honorable Speaker, your county, Meru, the percentage of forest cover is above 30%. You should be getting a size of billions, maybe 2, 3, 4 billion from carbon credit. I don't even know, even as Elgeyo Marakwet County, we don't know the beneficiaries of carbon credit from Elgeyo Marakwet County, from the 30% that we have forest cover. I don't know what happened. A few years ago, we used to be around 38%. So I don't know what could have happened to reduce that percentage from that 8 to around 30%. But we are doing a lot of engagement now to ensure we plant more trees, especially in our schools, to ensure we reach the 15 billion that our dear president has told us that we need to increase the forest cover so that at least we can make more money. Honorable Speaker, you know, the Rift Valley lakes, Lake Naivasha, Lake Nakuru, Lake Baringo, have, because of the changes in the global warming, they have increased in size. People have suffered. These are things that are reality, Honorable Speaker. We need to be serious. We need to focus. We need to conserve our forests. We need to plant more trees along the escarpments, like Elgeyo Marakwet County escarpment. We need to encourage our people to stop planting maize or finger millet and plant trees, because in the past they didn't know that you can make money from the forest. Now it is a reality. The regulations that have been put in this law are very important so that our people benefit from the conservation they are doing. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I don't want to take my time. I know many members are on the queue really wanting to contribute, because we have been called back from home to come and ensure that we pass this law so that next week we stand tall while we are at KICC as one of the few countries that have implemented and have actualized, so that the President may sign the law tomorrow into law. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Senator Shakil Abdallah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this bill, which is very crucial. It's a very important bill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we are aware, climate change is real. And this is the long-term shift of temperatures, whereby increase of rainfalls, which leads to floods, and decrease of rain in summer, which leads to droughts. Mr. Speaker, we know the causes of this climate change. It's because of the cutting of the trees, over constructions, which has been the real thing now. All the trees are going down or putting up big buildings. And again, forest fires. All these are the causes of the climate change, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the most crucial thing here is that as we pass this bill and we want to change our environment and improve the climate change, we need also to avoid the projects which contribute to destroying of our environment. Like, for instance, Mr. Speaker, there was a coal project which was coming to Lamu. If we had not gone to court and do the Andamanos, as which is our constitutional right, today we would be suffering with the carbon and all these environmental destroying projects. So as much as we pass this bill, the government also needs to be aware to reduce and avoid all the projects which are destroying our environments. Mr. Speaker, climate change is real, and the people of Kenya, they need to be educated. The importance of climate change and maintaining our environment. Mr. Speaker, when you go to Europe, when you litter the road or anything, you're fined, because people have really managed their environment. They are taking care of the environment. But you realize here in our country, people, they litter all over. They don't care. They throw rubbish anywhere. And that is one way whereby it's contributing to these droughts, all sorts of disease and everything. So we need to take the opportunity. In as much as we put these bills, they would be good in books if we don't educate our people on the importance of maintaining our environments and the importance of the climate change, for them to realize that the climate change is real and we need to take care of our environment. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I support the bill, and I hope it will also help this country to change the way we are looking at climate change and the way we are taking care of our environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Sheikh Mariam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, climate change is a global crisis. To overcome this, we thank and congratulate our President, Dr. William Ruto, for taking front line for this initiative. Mr. Speaker, climate change is a collective responsibility. for all sectors in the government. That's why our president is a front line for this initiative. Mr. Speaker, responsibilities for climate change is collective responsibilities for all government sectors, like education, because during drought, education sectors affect health. There is also, during flood, there is waterborne diseases, which is the sector of health. During flood also, there is a transport system, which is transport ministry, which is affected also. Agriculture is also affected, and also nowadays there is what you call carbon trading, which is under also trade sector. Mr. Speaker, the bills come at the right time for our country to benefit this business called carbon market. Mr. Speaker, the benefits and the benefit of this bill, the specific objective of this bill is to legislate on carbon rights, carbon markets and trading, qualification of investors in carbon business, project requirements, and inclusive environmental and social impact assessment so as to enable the high quality trading of emission reduction. Mr. Speaker, the benefit of this bill is to support our country to compile with Paris Agreement. It will also help in investment in carbon projects. It actually also add revenue streams for sustainable development. Mr. Speaker, also it also help in global training in interest in the forest carbon assets. Mr. Speaker, for this bill, I support, and it comes at the right time when Kenya having a summit. Mr. Speaker, our President, Dr. William Ruto, I congratulate him for that, taking these initiatives and become a front line of climate change, planting 15 billion. As he insists people to plant trees, I urge and request also him eradicate some.
Thank you. Senator Fatuma Du Rwandan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to join my colleagues in support of this bill. Mr. Speaker, this is long overdue because the issues of carbon credit is actually affecting many parts of this country without proper legislations in place. And I wish to thank the President and also the government for this particular initiative. For example, in my county, there is an organization called NRT, Northern Rangelands, in Isiolo County, and I think, Mr. Speaker, you are part of Meru County is also being manned by that particular organization. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, this organization is giving bursary to students. But majority of our people, they don't even know where that money comes from. And number two, they also don't even know how much is given to them as far as carbon credit is concerned. And I think once these legislations come into place, we can be able to regulate what is happening as far as that market is concerned. Again, Mr. Speaker, as my colleagues have said, most of these activities are happening on the ground. But if I can look at the current amendment, counties are not involved. And I know very well, as far as mineral issues are concerned in this country, counties are left out. And that is where most of activities are taking place. And I wish the government should also look at the possibility of the counties actually being involved as far as this carbon credit business is concerned. It's unfortunate that this bill is very urgent and we had to pass today. But we must look for an opportunity where we can amend and also bring on board the county governments. Mr. Speaker, finally, the aspect of enforcement is also very important so that those who are actually involved, once they are violating the right of the citizen, they can be actually taken to court, or members of public should be able to enforce on their rights. Finally, as far as tree planting is concerned, Mr. Speaker, Northern Kenya is mostly affected by the droughts. And I wish the government can put more focus in Northern Kenya as far as tree planting is concerned. It can help so many of our people. So I appeal to the President and also the government, give much focus to Northern Kenya as far as tree planting is concerned. And I know when we were young, we were actually being forced to plant trees in schools. And if we start from there, we can be able to actually take care of our environments properly, so that even the young ones who come up, they will be able to know the importance of tree planting and they can be able to plant. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I support.
Yes, what is your point of order, Senator Kinyua?
Bwana Spika, tumeketi na mwenyekiti wa kamati ya elimu. Bwana Spika, na ni desturi yetu wanafunzi wanapokuja hapa kuwapa motisha, tunawataja tu kwa majina. Najua leo shughuli ya leo ni ya dharura Bwana Spika, lakini ni vizuri Bwana Spika kuwataja tu kwa majina ndiposa tuwepa motisha Bwana Spika. Wao ndio viongozi wa kesho Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, nasikia watu wengi wakiongea Bwana Spika akisema mambo ni ngumu, lakini Bwana Spika hawa ni viongozi wa kesho. Tuwape motisha. Asante Bwana Spika.
Sasa Bwana Senator Kinyua, unajua chia wa hapa lazima apewe taarifa ya kusoma. Kwa hivyo ijafika kwangu usiku hata najua kuna wanafunzi hapa. Kwa hivyo kama kuna wanafunzi basi tumewakaribisha sana katika Senate ya Kenya. Nikiwa speaker tumewakaribisha. Asante. Let us have Senator Abbas Sheikh.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to join also my colleagues to support the amendment bill. Honorable Speaker, as you are aware, climate change actually is with us and it's actually a reality. And climate change has really impacted vastly on the pastoralists and the northern Kenyan part of this country. And therefore, you know, these days there's frequent drought, there's unreliable rainfall patterns as a result of the climate change. I therefore want to tell the bill is only talking about paying carbon credit to those who have the trees. I think for those of us who have no trees, we should be paid money from the carbon credit, and then so that they can be.
A minute, Senator Abbas. What is your point of order, Senator Karungo?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It was not my wish to interrupt the Honorable Senator when he's contributing, but I'm just a little bit concerned, and I would want to have your clarification. I think for transparency purposes, we require a projection of what you're looking at on our screens. Because I remember I came here very early, Mr. Speaker, and I've been pressing my button. It has been on since. I've seen some senators walk in, then they're given an opportunity. And I ask myself, I mean, as a senator of Kiambu, am I not allowed to contribute to this important matter, Mr. Speaker? We would want the projection. We would want the projection of what you're looking at, so that everybody will be knowing who is coming next, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, I've realized there is a pattern, and you ask me, I can bring that pattern of who starts, who goes next, and who goes last, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Karungo, from my screen, you are
Second last.
You were ninth on the screen. Remember, you approached me and you told me that there's a time that you are removed from the system.
Yes, when they invited you to speak, Mr. Speaker,
So,
as
I was
Senator
trying to
Kaduri,
see
they
how I
pressed
could-
my button.
Senator Dangwa, just have your seat. You know, you approached the chair that you were removed from the system when another member was given the opportunity to speak.
Honorable Speaker, let me continue. I think it's because of time.
Just a minute. Just a minute. Now, Senator Karongo, you know I was trying out to manage you, but now you know you are busting the bubble. So maybe on the horses, there will be some minutes. Maybe you'll get some chance to speak. Can you proceed and conclude, Senator?
Let me conclude my 3 minutes. Honorable Speaker, I think Honorable Speaker, as I said,
Senator Baz, you know, Senator Baz wants to give some very key issues affecting his region.
yes, very important ones actually.
Yes, Senator Baz, conclude.
Okay, Honorable Speaker, I think, as I said, climate change has so much impacted on the pastoral areas, especially in the Highlands. And what I was saying is that we shall not be paying carbon credit only to those who have trees. We should also pay money to those who have no trees so that they can be able to plant more trees. The pastures are most affected. And therefore, I'm saying that the money that's going to be accrued should be paid to the pastoralists. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the bill is saying that the community involvement, the communities are not even able to comprehend what this carbon credit entails actually.
What is your point of order, Senator Veronica Maina?
I think we are having a challenge with the system, Mr. Speaker. I have pressed on this system several times, and it is not even showing on that display. I have reported it to the clerk's desk, and unfortunately, it still does not show. I think we have a challenge with the system, and it needs to be rectified. Otherwise, even some of the senators, you never get to speak on this very important matter, Mr. Speaker.
You have noted that your region, from where you are up to the door, there is a problem because most of the senators are not on the screen. So maybe that should be rectified, and I hope the relevant office is now aware that some members are getting injustice. Senator, no. No, 1 minute for Senator Baz.
Saying they have taken most of my time, so I think I want some 3 minutes. Honorable Speaker, I'm saying that what we need is actually the carbon credit payment should be done also equally for the dryland areas so they can be able to plant more trees. 2, I think the greening of schools should be enhanced so that our children can have we can inculcate the idea of having trees in every place at young ages. Finally, I'm saying the communities, this bill says that the community will be involved, but it has not been said in what part of the community and what is the role of the community. So I think it's a high time that we can empower the counties so that they can be able to receive the money and they can empower the communities, and communities should be involved to plant trees and to get the carbon credit part of the carbon credit money. As it is now, it's actually only benefiting the few large ranchers and a few of the forest areas, and the money goes only to few individuals. So therefore, I'm saying that this thing, there's a lot of transparency. We must have some transparency. There must be an accountability in the carbon credit money that is being given to the people of the large farms. Therefore, I beg to support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sifuna Edwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would rather be discussing the broader issues about the equitable contribution of the African continent to this question of climate change. I believe that we as African states are getting the short end of the climate action because, Mr. Speaker, statistics show that we are only contributing about 4% of global emissions, and yet we are the ones suffering the brunt of climate change. Mr. Speaker, we've just come out of the longest drought in 40 years as a country in Kenya. And although we would want to have that broad-based conversation about equitable global climate financing, we are stuck here with a very minor factor of climate change, which is the question of carbon trading. Mr. Speaker, also allow me to dissuade you from the notion that you made that time you were contributing as a senator for the great county of Meru. That, Mr. Speaker, in fact, even we in the cities can actually benefit from carbon trading, because you should remember that even if you look at the definition of the carbon credits, it's not just about mechanisms that pull out the carbon from the air. It is also preventive measures to ensure that you actually prevent that carbon from getting in the air. And you will know that Nairobi carries a large number of the industries in this country. Actually, some numbers put it at 60%. If we can be incentivized so that even the companies that operate within Nairobi can then look for measures to prevent more carbon being spilled in the air through sequestration and other technologies, Mr. Speaker, we can actually also benefit as the people of Nairobi. Mr. Speaker, just allow me to speak to the positives in this act, because there are many negatives that we would talk about in the greater context that I've given. But if you look at 23D, Mr. Speaker, this bill requires that there shall be environmental impact assessment for every carbon trading project. Yes, we understand that greenery or plants are a major way of removing carbon from the air, but it's not every plant or crop that you put up or you plant is going to result in just positives. You've heard the senator, I think it was Senator Kinyua, talk about the negative effects of planting eucalyptus trees. We have had the complaints of plants such as the Madenge plant in sections of Rift Valley, so that an environmental impact assessment would actually guide us in the best way to undertake some of these projects. You go to section 23E, Mr. Speaker, that they will be required a community development agreement. I have heard some of my colleagues speak to what the role of the county governments is going to be. Under that particular section, Mr. Speaker, the county governments are given the responsibility of ensuring that they then can see that the bill has provided for those. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, it is also the responsibility of the county governments and the national governments to enforce the community rights negotiated under those community development agreements under Section 23E, so that the county governments have a great role to play, and also the communities have a lot to benefit if indeed these projects are undertaken in the right manner. Of course, for me, I would like better clarity on how we access these markets, especially for private individuals, because the bill only talks about private entities and public entities. We would like even individuals who undertake these projects to have access to
Senator Tobiko Pelis.
Finally. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support, the enactment of this bill. Mr. Speaker, I think we cannot overemphasize the importance of, a bill that redeems our situation in terms of climate, because we have suffered a lot, harsh climatic conditions and changes that have become so irregular and unpredictable, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, even because I see the emphasis on this bill is about carbon credit and monetization of the whole, tree planting and forest conservation, even as we do that, Mr. Speaker, I would say that it's very important that we have our forests, we have our clean environment, and if having economic value out of it is possible, then that's good. But it must not be the overriding factor, Mr. Speaker. We must still, have our environment, whether we are having money from somewhere or not. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to generations to come, Mr. Speaker. We must keep our environment, sustainable, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the counties that have, pastoralist counties that have faced a lot of very prolonged droughts, Mr. Speaker, I can assure you we have seen the harshest part of climate change, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have had a chance to compare of late, when we were in Uasin Gishu the other day, and compare Uasin Gishu and Kajiado and the other counties, Mr. Speaker. These people live in more like in Garden of Eden, Mr. Speaker. Whereas we live in environments that are terribly harsh, Mr. Speaker. We are trying. I bought some land somewhere in Kajiado, and there were no trees, there was nothing. I've been trying to plant trees. I was hoping that one day I will have birds in the place, and today I'm happy that in the morning, it's the birds that are waking me up. I was hoping to see butterflies that we used to see when we were very young. Now I am seeing a bit of butterflies in the area. And so I think we can redeem our environment, Mr. Speaker, if we put effort. Actually, when we were young, when we were in primary schools, we used to have what was called the 4K clubs, Mr. Speaker, which was, teaching us about agriculture, about environment and all that. I think we should go back to that, Mr. Speaker. But what hurts me most, Mr. Speaker, in terms of what we are losing, before we talk of what we will plant now, let's talk about conserving what we have, Mr. Speaker. I see a lot of charcoal burning, still in places like Kajiado, where we shouldn't have any charcoal burning right now, because we are creating a desert, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is very sad. Every time I meet a border carrying, the 10 sacks of charcoal, it hurts me so much, Mr. Speaker. I think there must be a way for us to address and to conserve, particularly the indigenous trees, Mr. Speaker, because it takes so many years for these trees to grow, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mudigi.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa ruhusa niweze kuchangia mambo ya mazingira na upandaji wa miti. Yangu tu ni kusema ni asante kwa sababu tuko na serikali ambaye rais anajali mambo ya mazingira, kwa sababu nataka kuambia watu wakati wa zamani, wakati hakukuwa nakatwa miti, hakukuwa na usomaji mwingi sana wa mambo ya makaa. Tulikuwa naona mvua ilikuwa inanyesha kwa kipindi ya miezi 3 na watu wapata chakula, watu wapata maji. Na pia mito nyingi ilikuwa na mchanga na hakukuwa na sinda. Sasa naunga mkono na ninaomba pia serikali pia iweze kuwa na upendo wa watu, kwa sababu kuna mambo inafaa itimishwe, kama ni mambo ya kila county, mambo ya maji, mboo na water pan na damu nyingi. Hata tukipanda hizo miti, kama hakuna hizo vitu zote, itakuwa ni kazi ya bure. Ingine nachangia ni kusema kama county, kama Embu County, tunaunga mkono, kwa sababu tunajua miti itatusaidia, tutapata kilimo bora na mambo itakuwa mazuri. Pia naomba pia serikali isaidie. Kule vijijini kuna vikundi na vijana ambaye wako na miti nyingi sana na wanalia, na serikali naye inasema mpaka haina mbegu. Kwa hivyo naomba tu serikali isaidie zile vikundi na vijana wa kule vijijini waweze kununua hiyo miti, ndio tuweze kupanda hiyo miti na ndio tuwe na mambo mazuri. Na tukifanya hiyo kazi yote, tutapata mvua na mambo mengi itafanyika. Pia naunga mkono hiyo maneno, na ninaomba pia mambo ya magari inatoa moshi nyingi sana. Pia serikali weke maanane ndio hiyo magari iweze kufanywa investigation na iweze kuwa tutakaa vizuri. Nikimalizia naunga hiyo mkono, na ninaomba kwa sababu sasa mambo ya walio wengi na walio wandogo tunaendelea kuseme sana, naomba siku ile tusione wale walio wachache wakipeana masufuria itakuwa ni ahivu isiyo kwa kichwa. Hiyo ingine naomba hata katibu mkuu ameondoka, mambo ya mawe isiyo kwa mifuko, kwa sababu tunajua wageni ni baraka, tuweze kutembea pamoja. Kwa hiyo namuomba nyinyi walio wachache, siku hiyo mkikuja na mawe pale nje mtakuta umbwa kali. Kwa hiyo naunga mkono. Asante Bwana Spika.
Senator Aminda Kibono.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought we were through with these discussions, not about the sufuria and the mawe, but then the discussion about the climate change. Mr. Speaker, I stand here to support the climate change amendment bill. We should be the champions. Having had our sister, mother, Wangari Maathai, who set the pace. Parliamentarians require capacity building on this one, Mr. Speaker. I urge the government to unlock some bureaucracy so that at least we can get the funding and some of us can be trained on climate change. And we should be the champions, seriously. The carbon credits have been discussed at length, and yes, we need to benefit from that. Other countries, the West, are benefiting from our own countries with the carbon credits, so why wouldn't we do that? And we should more or less have in exchange of, should I say, barter trade, and get many other benefits. They should improve our roads, the infrastructure, and many other many other projects, I mean, out of carbon credits. So we need to benefit out of it. Mr. Speaker, I feel strongly that we should also discuss about the restoration and conservation of lands, Westlands restoration, and policies also. We are not discussing, in fact, regarding the land restoration, we are talking about the climate change, but how do we restore the land? Mr. Speaker, I just came from Germany and I saw I went through some training on land restoration, and I thought it's one of a kind, and seriously, it wouldn't be just about planting trees and avocados, but then there are many other ways of restoring land. And also afforestation and reforestation also, Mr. Speaker. We need initiatives. We need to discuss on the policies of the same. We need to improve on our biodiversity and prevent soil erosion, Mr. Speaker. So there are many issues. I'm really looking forward for this summit, Mr. Speaker. And the climate change amendment bill has come timely. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Senator Veronica Maina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute to this important amendment, the Climate Change Amendment Bill 2023. And first of all, let me take this opportunity on behalf of the Senate and everyone else in Parliament to welcome all the delegates who will be coming to Nairobi to attend this very important conference. We are not expecting an ordinary engagement, Mr. Speaker. This is about livelihoods that have been challenged in Africa by the devastating effects of the climate change. And we are hoping that, Mr. Speaker, this is one conference that is going to go beyond the paperwork, beyond just discussions in boardrooms, Mr. Speaker, but one that will bring change to Africa in terms of carbon markets and carbon credits, Mr. Speaker. The discussion that is here, the debate that is here today on this bill, the bill itself offers practical legal framework and pathway to carbonization, Mr. Speaker, and it offers a roadmap towards a reduction of the flow of the heat-trapping greenhouses and gases that are being emitted into the atmosphere, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, we believe that this framework that is being offered here will encourage or create an environment that goes towards involving everybody and giving a roadmap for involvement of the citizens towards how they can reduce emissions from sources like power plants, factories, cars, emissions from cars, and other such sources that have caused quite a bit of a risk when it comes to the emission of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, Mr. Speaker. the adaptation by everyone will be important and will be needed, coupled by a change of lifestyle. For instance, the horror of food insecurity, unfortunately, is connected to these emissions, Mr. Speaker, and it will need to be seriously mitigated by taking certain steps which sometimes could just be very easy to take. For instance, Mr. Speaker, if people could walk more, if people could do more things that allow us to use sources of energy in spite of the fossil-based sources of energy, Mr. Speaker, then we would be saving the carbon dioxide that is being emitted into the environment, and that has challenged ecosystems and has irreversibly affected freshwater and even coastal ecosystem. Mr. Speaker, we need, and I hope that the Ministry of Education is listening to this debate today, Mr. Speaker, because, for instance, as we await to engage in the conference, the climate change conference that is coming next week, Mr. Speaker, we would hope that the schools would take a moment to teach the students something about the carbon credits, take them through a section 2 of the climate change amendment bill that gives exhaustive description of what carbon budget is, what carbon credits are, what is carbon market, what are the carbon projects, Mr. Speaker. And because I know, Mr. Speaker, that we have delegates coming from countries that emit carbon, who have high emissions of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, Mr. Speaker, I would hope that they will take up projects before the end of next week so that we can have realistic gains and realistic engagement with countries that have done the most emission into the environment, while Africa has been the one that has been paying the cost of these emissions, Mr. Speaker. So we are looking forward next week to an engagement that leads to realizable, practical solutions towards reduction of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Karungo Dhangwa Paul.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support the amendment of this bill on climate change. Mr. Speaker, I've heard from the minority side, the majority of them have been saying that this bill could have come earlier. But whatever is being discussed on this bill requires somebody who could understand, contextualize, comprehend, and that is none other than the President of the Republic of Kenya, William Ruto. That's why this bill has come now at the right time. Because when you discuss about carbon credit, Mr. Speaker, not so many people understand, as Senator Abbas was saying. And just to inform, carbon credits is the market-based approach to incentivize and promote the reduction of greenhouse gas emission, Mr. Speaker. Somebody would ask, what is this greenhouse emissions we are talking about? Mr. Speaker, some gases, when they are released in the Earth's atmosphere, when they go up there, they trap the heat. And when they trap the heat, Mr. Speaker, we get the greenhouse effect. When you get into a greenhouse, the way you feel the warmth or the heat is the same thing that now happens when they go in the Earth's atmosphere, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that's where the global warming term came in. Mr. Speaker, some of these gases are carbon dioxide, methane, and others, Mr. Speaker. But for us to reduce that warming, Mr. Speaker, we need to act on carbon dioxide. We breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. Mr. Speaker, the trees do the opposite. They take carbon dioxide. So, Mr. Speaker, if we plant this tree, as the President has directed, we are going to earn carbon credits. Mr. Speaker, what do we do with the carbon credits? It's just like bonga points. Once you remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, you earn some carbon credit. What do you do with them? Some countries, Mr. Speaker, who are polluting the atmosphere, China, USA, and other countries, Mr. Speaker, they can now buy the carbon credits from those countries that have really helped in reduction of those gases, Mr. Speaker. And that will attract investment in this country, Mr. Speaker, will attract funding when it comes to this carbon credit, Mr. Speaker. But I would want to urge this House, as we go on passing the law, Mr. Speaker, we should also give incentives to those people who have trees on their farms, Mr. Speaker. When you are paying your land rate, you should not pay the same with a person who has 100 or 20 or so many trees, Mr. Speaker. There should be an incentive so that we attract people to planting and taking care of the trees, because you'll understand when you're paying your land rate, you will have an incentive. Maybe half of your taxes will go back to you because you have planted trees, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the issue of global warming, Mr. Speaker, cannot be said enough, cannot be insisted enough, Mr. Speaker. And that's why I'm happy, because for the first time, this country will be hosting a summit that is climate change.
Honorable Senators, for the convenience of the House and to clear the business that we have this morning, the standing orders have given me powers to reorganize the sitting time. So I want to invoke standing order 34, 2A, to extend this morning session for a further 15 minutes. So the morning session will be concluding at 1:15 p.m. And now I request the Chair, Committee on Environment, to table the report of this bill that we are discussing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the Senate today, 31st August 2023. A report of the Standing Committee on Land, Environment and Natural Resources on the Climate Change Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills 42 of 2023.
Thank you. Honorable Senators, I will request the mover to reply, but he has some obligation to give a few senators who are on the screen here, maybe 1-2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I reply, Mr. Speaker, I know there are 5 colleagues who are still on the queue, so I'd wish to request if they could each take just a minute, then we'll still be perfect within the time. So, Senator, from the list I saw Senator Cherargei, Senator Kamau, Joseph, Senator Joe Nyutu, Senator Karen Nyamu, and Senator Hezena. If you could exercise your discretion, Speaker, a minute and a half each maximum.
And if you get 1 minute for Senator Mandago also, maybe it will be prudent.
Oh, I didn't see from the list. Okay,
then. No, yes, now on the screen.
Okay.
Okay.
Then we conclude it that way.
Thank you.
So that
Thank
we
you,
begin
Majority
voting
Leader.
at 1:05. In
Senator
that order.
Chalagay, 1 minute, 15 seconds. No, but you are not on the screen.
Mr. Speaker,
you have not. Sorry.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this amendment. I think the issue of climate change continues to be a big challenge, and I want to thank the President for being the champion. And the second champion in this republic is former Prime Minister and all of us. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think finally in future, the laws that come from National Assembly under Article 96, we must ensure that there is place and time for devolution, because I've seen counties have just been mentioned in passing. If we want to improve on the on-source revenue through carbon credits, Mr. Speaker, in future we must amend so that counties can benefit from all-source revenue. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I know many young people participate in tree planting and growing. We need also to create space for them so that young people can benefit going into the future. With those very many remarks, Mr.
Senator Kamau Joseph.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipatia hii fursa. Mheshimiwa Spika, wacha nichukue pia nafasi niweze kusupport mswada huu, mswada ambao ni mabadiliko ya tabia nchi. Mheshimiwa Spika, nataka niseme ya kwamba naunga mkono mswada huu, nikisupport pia vile ambavyo President wetu William Ruto ameweza kuwa katika mstari wa kwanza kuona kwamba amesaidia upande wa kuhamasisha mambo ya mazingira. Mheshimiwa Spika, nimetoka katika kaunti ya Lamu, kaunti ambayo Mheshimiwa Spika ina occupy 44%
ya forest ya katika Jamhuri yetu ya Kenya, Mheshimiwa Spika, na ningependa niseme ya kwamba ni muhimu sana counties ziweze kujumuishwa katika mambo ya carbon credit ili waweze kujivunia na kukaa maisha mazuri kama county ambazo ziko na forest kubwa. Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi niko na watu ambao pia wameathirika sana katika kaunti yangu ya Lamu, ikizingatiwa kwamba Boni Forest ni county ni forest ambayo imekuwa na
Senator Jojutu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just say one key important point.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to support this particular amendment bill, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say that this is something very important. And I know that this campaign will succeed. Mr. Speaker, if the campaign against smoking has succeeded the way it has, then this campaign against climatic degradation will succeed. Mr. Speaker, because we don't have much time, I just want to say that I'm very happy about carbon credits, because those that make energy saving vehicles in our counties, Mr. Speaker, will now be motivated. Mr. Speaker, we must look at our rivers again. We must stop cultivating just next to the river in order for us to maintain our climate. Mr. Speaker, because of the pressure of time, let me know.
Senator Kalen Njeri, Nyamu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you might want to... thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. And on the onset, I want to support this very important bill that has to do with the issues of climate. And also, I want to hail President William Samoei Ruto for putting Kenya on the global map and for being a champion in this dispensation on matters climate change. Mr. Speaker, Kenya, being a signatory of the Paris Agreement, shows very serious commitment by enacting domestic legislation that implements that particular agreement. And Mr. Speaker, some of the provisions of this bill, particularly those that are providing for...
Thank you. Senator Remaretian Yezena.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise to support this bill, and because I think being from Samburu, where we are greatly affected by the encroachment of huge multinational corporations like Senator Fatuma Dulo had mentioned, the Northern Rangeland Trust, we have seen an encroachment into the indigenous people's land, and there is need for a framework to regulate the sale and the trading of carbon, because, Mr. Speaker, while we look at the benefits of this framework, we must not have a tunnel vision, because at the same time, the sale of carbon credit is affecting the communities who are being chased through conflict and through displacement and encroachment of this concept.
Very well, Senator Mandago Jackson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I first stand to support the amendment of this bill on climate change and the issues of carbon credit. But Mr. Speaker, I just want to say one thing, that the carbon credit trading is a new platform that will be a revenue earner for this country. And Mr. Speaker, we all know that we have two levels of government. We must ensure that counties where forests grow will also benefit from the carbon trading. Number two, Mr. Speaker, I would wish that the drafters of the law and also during regulation development, Mr. Speaker, that those who are already trading on carbon credit in this country, and Mr. Speaker, it is surprising that Kenya is almost number 2 in Africa in terms of carbon credit trading, while we don't have a regulatory framework. Therefore, those who are already trading on carbon credit, Mr. Speaker, they should be made to make declarations of what they have been trading on.
Okay. Thank you. Senator Koiti Andrew.
At long last,
First of all, I think what is being discussed is important, but the manner in which it's being discussed is not proper. For the main reason that if we enact a law that we don't follow the procedure laid in the Constitution, and we're enacting this very important law, what outcome do we expect? And I think that if something is worth doing, it's worth doing well, and the end does not justify the means. We have been told that we have got a conference, therefore we must rush this bill, we must do whatever. The end does not justify the means. And I would like to plead that we step back and do this bill properly, and especially on public participation. We give the people of Kenya the chance to contribute. They cannot be given 8 hours to do public participation on an issue that is as important as this. I would also like to see the role of the Senate.
That is the end of the list that I was given by the Majority Leader. So, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to conclude by appreciating all colleagues that have taken time to comment on this very important matter, and those that we have equally lent various criticisms, areas of improvement. I hope our colleagues will take time, those that sit in the committee, to further enhance it, to make better. Of course, the most prominent has been the place and standing of our counties. Despite the assured percentage, I think it needs to be more definitive. Like I listened to a few of our colleagues raise and say, I wish the role and the place of our county governments was more properly defined in the bill. Of course, we have an opportunity to always enrich the work that we do. Nothing stops us, even as soon as tomorrow, once the bill has been assented to, Mr. Speaker, if we conclude on it as expected to as the Houses of Parliament, to begin in securing that particular place that many of us are saying that we need to see our counties, especially the mother counties that these resources are domiciled in, benefit more. And I think that's a place we can take a lead. What I know from experience, Mr. Speaker, just as a last comment, is that when any bill comes from the Assembly, it's very difficult to have a prominent role for our counties. The only place I see counties given prominence is when bills commence in the Senate. And therefore, the challenge is on us, if we want to enrich this conversation the way many of you are saying, is to immediately soon after, once we have set I think the overarching theme that we are being asked is to set the regulatory framework so that people stop taking advantage of our people. But once that is set, the second level of the fight is how do we now ensure that our counties specifically that host these resources get to benefit. And that's a conversation that I want to urge our colleague senators to begin that particular conversation and enhance it. At that particular point, we'll have an opportunity to dictate the conversation, because at that time, the bill will have begun here in the Senate. With those very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Majority Leader.
Still have 10.
When the division is going on. So I request the division bell to be long for 2 minutes. Yeah? 5? 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes.
Well, the Deputy Speaker of the Senate, Honorable Catherine Murungi, has directed that a 5-minute division bell be rung. The senators have just concluded the debate on the Climate Change Amendment Bill 2023, originating from the National Assembly. So basically now is that the members will be going into a voting session. This is pursuant to the House Standing Order 87 on the division where they will be voting for the bill to be read for the second time. And of course, this will be giving room for the bill to proceed to the next stage. That is a consideration, or having it being considered at the Committee of the Whole House stage. This should be coming in the afternoon sitting. Remember, this is a special sitting that was appointed to take place this day for the morning sitting and also the afternoon sitting. So there was a debate on this bill, each member getting enough time, or rather allocated 3 minutes to give their views on this bill that seeks to bring regulation to the carbon markets in the country. This is ahead of the African Climate Summit that will be happening in the country at the capital city. This is Nairobi from the 4th of September. That will see heads of state and heads of government institutions or agencies coming or flocking into the country to participate in that particular summit. So issues that have been raised by the members of the Senate is that this bill, each one of them standing and supporting the contents of the bill, majorly because the efforts of the communities who have been active in participating in trying to reduce the carbon dioxide in the air by planting of trees and other greening activities, that at this time they will be able to gain enough from the carbon markets that the country that will be now regularized in a way that the communities, the country, as well as individuals and private sectors that have been largely participating in trying to reduce the carbon emissions within the country have been doing. So this is a division bill where senators will, in a few minutes, get into voting on the bill to be read for the second time. But as we have seen, most of the senators have been in support of this bill. So we are looking forward to having the vote be positive, that the bill proceed to the next stage. So 5 minutes, once the 5 minutes are over, the senators will be in the chambers. The doors will be closed. As you can see at the back, the doors will be closed. That is the majority leader trying to see whether the House has enough numbers. We need at least 15 members in the House to enable the division process to be able to take place. And once the number is achieved, the bell is still on. Once the number is achieved, then the doors will be closed and the members will be using their cards. This is electronic voting, and it will reflect on the screen to show how many members are present and how many have voted. But the division is basically on that the bill be read for the second time and give it room or enable it to pave into the next stage, that is the Committee of the Whole in the afternoon, therefore third reading, and then later the process continues. So that is the division bill. Members who participated in this bill also raised concern over the involvement of county governments in this whole process, with majority of them saying that most of the activities in terms of tree planting and the greening activities have been on at the counties, and thereby the counties should be fully involved. Allow me to hand you over to this division stage. The division bell is now off.
Ring the quorum bell again for 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes, clerk.
Well, an additional 2 minutes for the division bell. Remember earlier on, the Deputy Speaker had invoked Standing Order number 34 on the aspect of additional time. Normally the sitting ends at around 1, but there was an additional 15 minutes to be able to conclude on this morning business on that particular bill. So the bell has, or rather will be ringing for another 2 minutes. It looks like the quorum has not been achieved. Remember, we need 15 members in the chambers. So once the quorum is achieved, then the bell will stop and the doors will be closed. As you can see, I see the clerk. All right, allow me to hand you over to this live broadcast.
Members, if you are ready, let's vote. Let us now vote. I hope you logged out and then in so that the system can really capture you nicely. If you are done, then let's proceed and vote. Huh? Okay. Honorable Senators, Honorable Senator, Honorable Senators, I put the question that the Climate Change Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills number 42 of 2023, be now read a second time. Now, Honorable Senators. Honourable senators, have your seats. Senator Ndii Oketch. Honourable senators, I now give the results of the division. The ayes 28, nays 1, abstention 0. So the ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Climate Change Act 2016 and for connected purposes.
Yeah, okay, you can now open the door. Honourable senators, we have come to the conclusion of the business this morning, and there being no other business on the order paper, the Senate stands adjourned until today, Thursday, that 1st August 2023 at 2:30.